Hello, everybody. We are back. It is me, Marshall, here with my good friend Omar Rashan Soda Pop Borja. We are here, the podcast formerly known as 100 Yards of Podcast. Today, we have some interesting topics. In the middle of March Madness, there's going to be a little bit of March Madness with some of these delayed Patriot League games. What's going on with that? We'll get into that a little bit later. But we're going to start it off. Omar, what do you think about? You know how I feel. I constantly am dogging on the SEC for having some of these trash cupcake games, and then they get in there like two teams in the playoff every year. But you know what we saw recently? We saw the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and the Big 10 and the Big 12. I don't even know. Omar, you're gonna have to explain this one to me. You're gonna have to explain this one to the listeners. What's up? What is going on out there in this landscape?
So, in my free time, just thinking in this room, not much else to think about. Um, but so looking back, you had the Big Ten and the Pac-12 when they released their schedules midway through the fall, when the season already kicked off. They announced that they were going to have, their seven game conference schedule and an extra game on conference championship weekend between say like the number 7 finisher will play this in the West, will play the number 7 finisher in the East, number 6 will play number 6, and so on and so forth, along with the conference championship. And they sort of went through with it. Some of the games got canceled. Some of those games became replays of rivalries that got postponed, like the Old Oak and Bucket got postponed to championship weekend to that Saturday. Same thing with the Paul Bunyan's Axe game, Minnesota and Wisconsin. Pac-12 did the same. They had a few sort of meaningless conference games along with their conference championship. And I know this is probably a one-year thing, but I'm sort of wondering the viability of this idea in the future of having these extra games where everyone else plays an extra conference game simply for the money. I mean, I want to know your thoughts about that, Marshall.
Yeah, honestly, it's probably. I guess now that I think about it, it could probably go one of two ways, right? It's like, what do these conferences want? They want a team in the playoff, and an extra game does not necessarily help them get a team in the playoff unless that game is also meaningless. So assuming that game is meaningless and that they're not going to get upset, like you're not going to put in your top, Ohio State again. You're not going to run Ohio State back against Michigan, in that prime slot. But if you are running Ohio State against Rutgers, maybe you pull in a little bit of that money, and then I definitely could see that working out. But it's like, I think anything that puts these conferences at risk of potentially not being in the playoff, they're not going to do it. It's like, I was like reading an interesting article, actually, it's about basketball, right? It was like, they're talking about, Power 5 teams should pull away and like almost create their own tournament away, and it's away from all these mid majors. And it's like, and then of course, all these mid majors get mad upsets this week. And it's like, but at the end of the day, the Power 5 conferences, I'm sure they would do it if they could, because Illinois doesn't want to go in there and get embarrassed by Loyola. Like these teams don't want to go and get embarrassed. And that's the same thing in football. Nobody wants to get embarrassed. When you get upset, you'd rather have not played that game at all, no matter, what you could have, because it's like the risk reward on it. You win, okay, cool, you beat, UAB. You lose, it's like, oh wow, you're embarrassed. You're never going to get in the top 10 again. So it's really tough. I think, assuming the money is good, they'll probably do it. And given that it's in conference, I think they could probably get away with a little bit more, maybe a little upset. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So, yeah, I think the one thing standing in the way is like the NCAA saying like to have these extra games, extra conference games for the sole purpose of, I guess, money and getting the players an extra game. And I could see it being a cash grab for sure. And like you said, like you don't want to put anything in the way, like an extra game in the way, because I noticed that banner in the background, Texas with 1 second. They're 1 second away from not having a spot in the BCS title game in that infamous Big 12 championship because of sort of an unnecessary game against a Nebraska team that they were, supposedly way better than.
Yeah.
And the biggest example of that from this past season, is Texas A&M Tennessee, where A&M is number 5, and they ended up beating Tennessee by 3 touchdowns. But if they lost that game, they're out of the playoff discussion. And the SEC probably could have had like a lot of regret too with the way the Notre Dame Clemson game that day ended up, with Notre Dame getting blown out and that actually having to be a debate. It's like, do we put Notre Dame in after they get blown out with Trevor Lawrence on Clemson, or do we put Texas A&M in? So I can sort of see that where they maybe exclude the top 2, like their second place team for New Year's Six purposes. and have, maybe like let me think, in the West, it would be like Vanderbilt versus Mississippi State, like a crossover game
Yeah.
or something like that for the sole purposes of money and I guess those fan bases. Um, but yeah, looking at the TV numbers, like none of these games really made a dent. The only one that really exceeded a 1 rating or higher was the Texas A&M Tennessee game at noon, and it was competing against big noon kickoff Ohio State Northwestern with a 4.65 rating on Fox, and Oklahoma Iowa State with a 1.8 rating. Surprisingly, that was intriguing too, because I guess people wanted to see like Ohio State's just that much of a brand compared to. I mean, it's just interesting. It's like the same thing where you have like a brand versus a sort of like a non-brand of the conference, with like Northwestern, Iowa State. That I'd love to dig into that one more. But yeah, some of these games are just like, kind of a joke, honestly. It's like, why are these games even happening? Like Illinois, Penn State in the midst of like one of their worst seasons in like the last 15 years. Nebraska-Rutgers was another one. The ratings aren't available, but 610,000 people watched that one on Friday night, compared to 875,000 watching Ball State Buffalo, which rightfully should have happened. If you watch Nebraska Rutgers instead of Ball State Buffalo, you have some issues. Like, you have some issues need to be resolved.
Hearing those numbers like out loud, it's just kind of crazy that it's like anything less than 1 million like on national TV seems kind of wild, because it's like you look at like when PFT, or I'm sorry, when Big Cat was like playing Twitch, he was playing fucking NCAA football on Twitch, and he was getting like 400,000, 500,000 viewers on that thing concurrently, live viewers. And Nebraska Rutgers can't pull. Come on, you can barely pull less than double that. That kind of blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the fact that it's like Nebraska is like disinterested fan base. Rutgers has never been a draw in the New York City TV market, so that might contribute to that. And plus, if Nebraska had a real chance of losing that one. I think they're down 14-3 to Rutgers at one point.
Yeah.
They had a real chance of losing that one to the Scarlet Knights, and that would have been an embarrassing loss for the program, kind of like Texas losing to Kansas back in 2016. But I mean, honestly, I feel like if there's one purpose for these games, it would be cool to see a game like that where Rutgers beats Nebraska for the first time ever, or whoever they haven't beaten on the west side of the conference for the first time ever, or even like a Vanderbilt. Put Vanderbilt against maybe Auburn in the down here and see if Vanderbilt can beat the Tigers for a rare win. So I mean, I think that could be a potential for that, but I'm sure the blue bloods of those conferences would very much not like that, and not like to be paired with the laughing stocks of the conference in a down year.
Oh, for sure. And it's like it's also kind of interesting to think about, like, what happens when players are going to eventually get paid, right? Like, it makes me wonder, like, how is that structure going to work? Because if you give them another conference game, might the players be inclined to push for this extra game, if it brings them a little bit of extra revenue?
That's a good point. And that could scare away the conferences for sure. I mean, I didn't think about a name, image, likeness, or paying the players. That could be something as well, because that's something that bowl games, I think, are trying to figure out when it comes to name, image, likeness. If they can get endorsements for players leading up to these bowls, so you don't have players sitting out of bowl games and taking away the luster of these bowl games.
Yeah.
So that's something interesting to think of. Another thing that I would like to see is, Marsha, have you heard of The Room? Have you ever seen The Room with Tommy Wiseau?
I haven't seen The Room. I watched The Disaster Artist.
Oh, okay.
The making of The Room.
I mean, like, we all have a taste for like something like for bad like media, I guess the bad parts of the fine arts, and
Wait, did you watch The Room?
no. I saw a video on YouTube about why
Okay.
people like The Room so much, even though it's such a bad movie.
Have you watched The Disaster Artist?
I haven't. Is it equally bad?
That's funny. It's on net. No, it's on Netflix. No, it's about. So it's like James Franco and Dave Franco, and they play like Tommy Wiseau and the other guy, and it's like about them like making the movie, and it's hilarious. And they like reenact these scenes like throughout the movie, like from The Room, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, this is like so bad. There's no way like the real movie's like this. And at the end, they like compare them side by side, and it's like spitting images. It's hilarious. You need to watch it. It's so funny.
Yeah, now I'm intrigued. I mean, yeah, I've been low on time lately, but I might just carve some time out to watch that. But when I thought about these like unnecessary conference games, I thought about December 5th, 2020, a very iconic game in the history of the MAC, Akron versus Bowling Green. Akron in the midst of let's see, they lost 4 straight on the way there. Like, in the midst of a huge losing streak. They're, I think, over 20 games. Their last win was against Northwestern in 2018 when they won the Big Ten West, and Akron went 4-8 that year. I still don't know how that happened. I think that's a bigger upset than App State, Michigan. Honestly, like
Really?
if you factor in everything, just Akron going 4-8 and then Northwestern winning 9 games and their division in the Big Ten West, it's like that just should, because App State was, they were 3-time national champions, I think, or back-to-back
Yeah.
national champions in FCS. So you can kind of see it happening, but I mean, not so much with Akron. But yeah, they played Bowling Green in the midst of a really bad year, December 5th. And I gotta say, like, instead of watching the 3:30 ABC game or like the Fox game, whatever it was on that time, I was watching Bowling Green Akron, because in sort of like a sick and twisted way, like The Room, I mean, it's just something. It's like fine art, you know. It's amazing. I saw some muff punts. I saw some, some block punts, fumbles, everything, you name it. It was a comedy of errors as Akron won 31-3.
I'll agree with you. And like bad football is kind of good to watch just because it's more interesting. Like it's unpredictable. You don't know what's gonna happen. But a bad movie where it's just constantly bad and you just can predict that it's gonna be bad. Oh boy, you gotta set your expectations a little bit higher on that one, I think.
I will say this. I will say December 5th, as I look back, still reflecting. That was kind of a rough patch in the talking stage I was in. So it brought a brief reprieve from the reality I was facing. Hoping that things would get better, just taking my mind off and watching Bowling Green Akron. And ultimately things didn't work out. But I just want to know that the best cure when you're beefing with your girl or beefing with your guy, it's bad football, just from experience is the best cure. Also
Bad football and a large Little Caesars pizza.
Yeah, Laura. Hey, it's like the meme says, little Caesars don't taste bad. You don't have someone in your ear telling you it's nasty. But yeah, like another one of those extra games that weekend was Washington State, Utah, which I'll note had the lowest ratings of the weekend. We won't go any further about that game, especially Utah football, for various reasons. But
I mean, mostly because pretty much like the fan base is entirely made up of like pretentious narcissists who really don't know something good when it's right in front of their face, and we'll just leave it at that.
Dang, wow, that's very reassuring, Marshall, and very yeah, we'll just move on from there. But yeah, like maybe these extra games for sure. Maybe the conferences will look into them. The main obstacle is the NCAA, and something I've noticed from the NCAA is they're very inconsistent, like maybe said person. As in, they're about player safety sometimes, other times they're just about the money. Like in the Centennial of College Football 2019, when they just randomly moved up Miami, Florida, to have a sort of showcase game for the sesquicentennial of college football, even though that rivalry is like not a very like historic rivalry. Like the teams don't meet like very often for it to be like a huge rivalry. And I know Jackson's gonna kill me, saying this about Florida, Miami, but it's just not like a marquee rivalry. And so the NCAA did that. I mean, obviously that was a money move. They might do this for the money move and say like, hey, extra conference games, let's do it. So the NCAA very inconsistent. You need to bully the NCAA, as we saw this week, to get them to do the right thing with the women's women's basketball tournament gyms, which is just so ridiculous.
I mean, clearly it's like to them money talks.
Money talks, yeah, and reputation, like that's what it is. Reputation and everything is, for the NCAA, even though like they're just so deplorable. I dislike the NCAA. Like it's like that picture of Elon Musk or that segment from a 60-minute interview when he says, "I do not respect the SEC. I don't respect the NCAA."
It's actually hilarious. That hasn't occurred to me before because he's like, he's talking about, the government. But dude, we should make that like a reaction video. Like, I do not like the SEC. Like every time an SEC team wins, that'd be hilarious.
That's what happened. Someone tweeted that when Tennessee lost by like 2 scores to Georgia State. Someone posted, "I do not respect the SEC."
Oh yeah, dude, that's awesome.
Hey, they're always one step ahead on Reddit college football. That's
real.
who it was from. They're always one step ahead. Oh yeah, like another idea with these extra games is something I'd like to see is what if you had one of the independents not playing a conference championship ever, whether it be UConn, UMass, New Mexico State, Liberty, those 4. Army's gotta have the bye week for the biggest rivalry in the country, Army Navy. They gotta have that bye week, so Army wouldn't be able to take part, or even BYU, even a year where like BYU is looking for that sort of final exclamation point. They can schedule a game on championship weekend. I mean, do you think there is an appetite for independent football? I know UConn's a national brand, and there definitely is an appetite there. with their CBS Sports Network contract. But otherwise, like for the UMasses and Liberties.
That probably just depends. I mean, like this year, yeah, like Liberty, obviously, very highly ranked, very good team. Like, you post Liberty against BYU, like that's a very attractive matchup, You know what? Maybe it's an interesting idea. Maybe you have like almost like a conference championship of the two highest ranked independents. That could be pretty interesting. But I mean, assuming that there are two decent ones, yeah, I'd say there's appetite. But otherwise, it's like you're not going to compete with like Alabama, Georgia, So if you're going to have like a middling UMass versus like a middling UConn, it's like, oh, that might cost. I guess I don't know exactly how revenues and expenses break down on some of these productions, but it's like I can't imagine that that's going to break even very easily.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and maybe ESPN can pay off one of the local networks or the streamers that broadcast those games for UMass and New Mexico State, because they're both like regionally televised with online streaming. So maybe they can buy them out. But we saw how like teams work quick scheduling games. So why not? It's like UMass is like 5-6, or like they're 6-5, they're having a good year, and Liberty, of course, is having a good year too. It's like, why not link up again, or not again, but just link up and schedule this game. Even like, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it makes sense to like regionally, like maybe you do like, but then again, it's like tough because what if you like schedule this kind of thing, right? And you have UMass at 0-11, 0-12, like, are you still scheduling that game?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Well, I mean, as we know, with for me, the last 5 years or so, watching Hawaii football at midnight, staying up till wee hours in the morning, there's always an appetite for late night football. So like, why not have one of these games at say Aggie Memorial Stadium out in Cruces, and have it at 10 o'clock after all the conference championship games? It's like the end of the college football regular season against Liberty or against UMass, and say it's like a high scoring game with like no defense. Like there have been some very iconic moments in Aggie Memorial Stadium history, like the foot reception in 2015 against Idaho. Like that was like one of the plays of the year.
Omar, I don't know one person who can't remember the foot reception. It lives forever in the memories of all Americans, for sure.
Yeah, it lives rent free in my head, as the kids say. I gotta make a TikTok. It's like what's a sports moment lives rent free in your head, and just like clip that video.
Oh, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I might do that. But yeah, even like with Hawaii, because like if Hawaii ends up like saving their 13th game option, their Hawaii exemption for that final weekend, if they don't make the Mountain West title game, you could have like a sexy intersectional game with like Liberty and Hawaii, like that, because that's what used to happen on conference championship weekend. Like you'd have like back in like the mid 2000s or so, 06, 07, 08, you'd have Hawaii play like a last game against like a Power 5 school. And this isn't a Power 5 school, but these games like were actually good at times. Like in 2008, you had Cincinnati already clinched a spot in the Orange Bowl at 10-2. They're like trailing in the fourth quarter to Hawaii in a game that Joe Testore called. The Testore effect was in full effect out in Aloha Stadium. So this could be something good if Hawaii or the Independents jump on this for like the last game of the college football year.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm still imagining your late night New Mexico State matchup where you have like 3 students there, and then maybe there's like some weird hippie from like Ruidoso that shows up for some reason.
That is highly specific. That's very specific. But I think also too, thinking about this, I guess as we sort of like wrap this to a close, it's like I think conferences that could benefit from this in reality are the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, because once like championship Saturday kind of concludes, there's like no late night game. So why not own that spot like you do every other weekend?
You're assuming that they want to own that late night spot. I mean, from my understanding, there's been some controversy around them wanting to not have that anymore.
I mean, yeah, I know, but it's like, I mean, like, look at Big Noon Kickoff, like when USC played at noon. I mean, how much of a draw was that really to the conference? And I can probably pull that up right now and scroll down. Like, I don't think that was like getting that slot and playing at noon and competing against like, a Clemson conference game, or like a Big 12 game on, or actually it wouldn't be a Big 12 game on Fox, but like a Clemson conference game on ABC, or like whoever else is playing. Like, it just didn't seem like that much of a draw,
Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, that was the second highest rated game in the time slot. So it was close behind West Virginia, Texas, and compared to the late night games on ESPN. Washington State, Oregon State at 10:30. That drew 594,000 viewers compared to Arizona State USC. A very very good game for USC, not so much for Arizona State. That Arizona State
it was good until the last few minutes.
Yeah, exactly. That Arizona State USC game at noon drew 2.3 million TV viewers. So I mean, if they want to sacrifice in-person attendance in the future for TV views, I mean, that's on them. But like I'm saying, it's like the Pac-12 Mountain West are kind of like they're kind of bound, like not really duty bound, but kind of bound inevitably to the late night spot. And I feel like maybe they should embrace that because those slots didn't exist in the mid 2000s. I mean, no one really cared for late night football. The networks weren't there. So
yeah. I mean, all I say is that, the only people really watching that stuff, they're either football fanatics like yourself, or more than likely they are drunk gamblers waiting to see if the over hits.
See, that is the point. It is more football to gamble on. Why do you think people love spring football in the FCS?
Well, you know what? I suppose if you like that.
I mean, hey, we're here for the degenerates as well as the gentlemen.
I know I'm saying that, but really it's like I'll gamble on anything if you give me odds. So
yeah, honestly, like I'll act like
I've been sports betting.
Like an expert.
Yeah, once sports betting is more accessible, you'll definitely find me on there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when it gets less shady, that's when more people are going to show up for sure. But yeah, I mean, I we'll see what happens these extra games if that's another effect of the pandemic. We've already seen like one effect of the pandemic, the quick turnaround in game scheduling that already has been tossed aside as teams are still scheduling games out in 2030 as if they didn't learn anything. So we'll just have to see for sure. And yeah, that closes the book on that idea. I think as we close in general, I want to ask about the recent trend of Jackson State taking network TV slots on ESPN2. Yeah, ESPN2 the past 2 weeks. Like, what are your thoughts on that, Marshall? Like, I mean, do you think it's good for the conference to have like one team be the reason that I mean, your conference is on ESPN2 and ESPN? Like, I think it's great for the conference, but over time, I mean, the other schools they gotta be tired of this.
I mean, it's like, yeah, but it's like, is there anything that Vanderbilt can complain about if Alabama's always taking the top time slot? Like it's like, no, I mean, obviously it's not that drastic here in this instance, but I mean, can you really fault like if one school like is a consistent better draw? Like, I don't know if this is the case, but assuming it is the case, if they are a better draw than all the other schools in the conference, I mean, it makes sense. I get that the other conferences might get upset, but it's like, I don't know what to tell them. Like, maybe like beat them. I don't know.
I mean, well, the thing is, it's like, so 2 words, I guess, for context with Jackson State.
Sure.
Something that Jackson and I've talked about because Jackson's a huge Deion Sanders fan. Yeah, exactly. Deion Sanders coaching Jackson State. That's the main reason why Jackson State's on TV. And I'm not discrediting their football team. They're having a good year so far at 3-0 or 3-1 after their last loss, but people weren't there when NCAA was winning Celebration Bowls, when Tariq Cohen was doing his thing for NCAA. People weren't there when Grambling State was winning SWAC titles. Like, they weren't airing those games on ESPN2 and ESPNU. So it's like Deion Sanders all of a sudden comes and brings the shine to the SWAC, and it kind of discredits like what the players have done, the past decade or so with the conference. And that's sort of like where my problem lies.
Maybe take the other flip side of it though. It's like, you get Deion Sanders, maybe he's bringing attention and finally illuminating some of the things that other people have done. Like, maybe by Jackson State being on, it'll give a little credence to their opponent also being on TV, right? And maybe it'll allow them to showcase what they've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. This weekend's game that was on ESPN2 against Alabama State, that game was down to the wire. I'm not sure if I can get TV ratings for that, being as it's spring football, but I mean, they scored with under 2 minutes left to give Deion Sanders his first loss of the season. So,
Did you see the scoreboard? They put up the picture of him.
Yeah, I saw the scoreboard. That was kind of childish. I can see why he's mad,
I'm just saying, it's like, everything will come back to you eventually. So,
I mean, yeah, but it's like,
for those of you who don't know what we're referring to, on the scoreboard there, it was at Alabama State, right?
Yeah, it was Yeah.
So the Alabama State scoreboard, right when they took the lead there at the very end, they put up a picture, the famous picture of Deion, the draft day picture, chain, the watch, the sunglasses, talking on the phone, the draft day, and so they put that up on the scoreboard. It's pretty savage.
It's petty for sure, but I guess it brings like that energy and trash talk to the SWAC where people like, I mean, the SWAC already draws like the biggest amount of fans out of the FCS conferences, but this just like adds to it. Where it's like, yeah, the coaches getting after each other, you know?
It's some swagger, man. It's some
Yeah, it's
swagger. You
the
know, you put
swagger of
that
the
on
SWAC.
ESPN. You put that on ESPN. People will come back and watch that. You know, that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll see what happens in the fall, and I mean, something that we'll probably discuss like in a couple of weeks is like the Bayou Classic with NBC Sports Network shutting down and giving everything to Peacock. Like that rivalry was honestly that was I'd have to say the Rose Bowl game of Black college football, and like I'm saying this sort of as a layman, and I also say this sort of knowing like a bunch of the iconic HBCU classics like the Turkey Day Classic, the first ever HBCU Classic, the Turkey Day Classic, the Florida Classic, which is still on ESPNU to this day, out in the Citrus Bowl, or you even call it the Citrus Bowl. It's probably some corporate name now, out in Orlando, with the with the Citrus Bowl, or the Magic City Classic, another good one in Birmingham. But people always look to the Bayou Classic because it was on NBC for a number of years, got moved to NBC Sports, but people always know like New Orleans, Thanksgiving weekend, Grambling Southern, it's going to go down. And we don't really know much about that anymore because NBC Sports Network's not going to happen or not around. So maybe this is momentum for the SWAC in a much needed time, in a sort of like crossroads in their media rights. But I think it should be taken with a grain of salt that it's like, hey, so the TV cameras finally came around during a pandemic, and when Dion comes around, okay, interesting. And I'm not discrediting Dion, but it's just like something we should like watch out for.
No, I get where you're coming from. It's like they definitely deserve a little bit more attention before this. But I think it's like I think you gotta take what you take. What is it, like, roll with the punches, essentially, right? It's like, they've been discredited, but it's like now you got a little chance to shine. Do what you can.
Exactly. I mean, I can't help but think of the Bachelor, what they
Oh my
did,
God.
a summer of racial unrest in this country, and then that's what finally pushed them to have a black bachelor. It's like, give me a break.
You want me to go over there right now and ask them about that? See if they'll give a little interview.
No, that they probably won't. That show's like it's in shambles right now with what's happening.
You know where they're filming it right now?
Oh, it's in New Mexico, right?
Dude, it's like Tamaya right there down the street.
Are you? No way. What?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Well, Dean Gontis?
Yeah.
He posted on his Snapchat the other day, like he was like filming. He's like, "Oh look, all their limos are here."
Dude,
Like,
that's actually wild.
They're recording it right
no
there.
idea.
Yeah.
That's
right
actually
now.
wild.
Right now they're recording it. Yeah.
Dang, right now? Yeah, shoot.
Should I go over there, blow up their spot a little bit?
Nah, man, not if you want to end up in cuffs.
I'll be like, I'm the new Bachelor.
yeah. Just introduce yourself as Lil Dicky or
Oh my God, David Bird.
Lil Dicky or Chase from Zoe 101.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry, man, I gotta bring that back from high school. I guess this is a good point to end on before Marshall puts some heat on me like he's done before.
Bro, I'm about to end your whole career.
Yeah, and so before he does that, if Marshall's any statements that aren't roasts, or I mean, even if they are roasts.
I will say, I think at the beginning I mentioned us with some Patriot League talk. I think that's meant to be for next week, so I apologize to the viewers if you're looking forward to some Patriot League talk. But we will get to that.
Yeah, selling the steak and selling the sizzle, not the steak.
Yeah. Well, not but selling the sizzle on that grade A5 Wagyu. You can hear that marbling sizzle over the hot flat iron. Oh, baby. That is worth waiting for. All right. And that's our Patriot League talk. That is worth waiting for.
Yeah. I mean, because there's a special rivalry next week if it doesn't get postponed. And I mean, I'm sure you guys can guess what rivalry it is if you're a great college football fans. If you're not, shame on you because it's the most played rivalry in college football. But until next week, if Marshall has no further statements or roasts,
I rest my case, Your Honor.
Okay. Until next time, peace, love, and soul, everyone.